Happy Halloween, everyone, and welcome to Deep Cuts of Horror, your horror podcast that cuts deeper. My name's Dylan, and I'm joined again by my co-host Jacob, and today we are going to be talking about the cinematic something that is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And before we begin, it's Halloween, so we should probably do something special. I wanted to open the floor up to you, Jacob, and just lightly start out with maybe a Halloween memory. So, what was your first Halloween costume?
My first Halloween costume ever? I don't remember. I would have probably been a young child.
First one
Uh,
you remember.
the first one I remember was a little wizard outfit. It was a Harry Potter outfit, but I put that in air quotes because it really wasn't. What it was I had like a purple star-covered cape and a pointy star-covered wizard hat and some glasses with tape around the nose piece. I don't know what it's called. I don't wear glasses.
Oh,
And then
copyright friendly Harry Potter.
yeah, it was like Harry Potter at home. That's it. Honestly, that's literally what it was Harry Potter at home. It was Harry Potter from what we have at home. And then I had a temporary tattoo of a lightning bolt on my forehead. But it wasn't a scar of a lightning bolt. It was literally just like a lightning bolt, like Captain Marvel or something. I don't even know if I was in school yet. Maybe I was in kindergarten at the time.
So this
But
would be before the movie.
When did the movie
Or was
come
it
out?
2000, 2001?
It would have been around that time. Because 2002 was around when I first started going to school. So yeah, that's my earliest memory of a Halloween outfit, and I made a tiny version of that outfit and I put it on a stuffed animal that I have in my apartment, which I don't. Nobody's gonna get that joke but me. But I just thought it was really cute. It was something fun to do for Halloween.
You should share it. We should share it to the Instagram.
Yeah, I can dig up a photo of that.
I'm excited. I'm excited now. So, my first Halloween costume that I remember was I went as Simba from The Lion King. Like kid Simba. It was like a jumpsuit and it had it was like a thick kind of like foam headpiece that like my face went into a hole between his mouth. And that was the look. I mean, I was like maybe 3 or 2 or something like that, but I remember it, and I remember being hot shit.
Man, that is unfortunate that you were so young because you kind of look like a lion now.
Now, it's just because I'm Jewish and I got all this hair everywhere. Also, I don't know enough about lions to make a really good pun about it. One time when I was interviewing for a job, they asked me, "What animal are you? If you could be any animal, what animal would you be?" And naturally, being the little Miss America that I am, my answer was an emperor penguin because they work hard together to ensure that no one is left out in the cold. And y'all can borrow that. That's like the best answer to give if you're given that question in a job interview to land the job.
Do you believe that the Emperor Penguin line is a genuine job snagger? I
I
have never
do.
heard anyone claim that before. Okay.
Well, only if you're in a position like I was where you were prompted.
Also, yeah, why is that a question someone would ask you in an interview?
I don't know. It was can you pass a drug test? Do you want to pee in a cup? What animal would you be?
What animal would pass a drug test? Should have asked that.
Well, turns out like I did that job for 3 years and the correct answer should have been an ass. A very dumb ass because that job was terrible. But enough about my former employer. Today we are here to talk about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. The tagline of which is very well known as The Night No One Came Home, a play on the original Halloween movie where it is The Night He Came Home. But it still doesn't make sense for this movie because they clearly have to come home to watch the big giveaway in this story. So I know I ask you this a lot, Jacob, but what were your kind of notions going? I feel like with a Halloween movie, a lot of people go into it expecting a certain something. What did you have going into this?
Yeah, so this is actually a film where that question is pertinent, so I don't mind it so much. I was expecting it to be a Halloween film, and by which I don't mean that it was a film centered around Halloween. I mean it was a film centered around Michael Myers' Halloween, some kind of slow, inevitable slasher relating to that canon. And boy, was is that absolutely not at all what this was. This film has nothing at all to do with the Michael Myers mythos, except for a small gag they did where they're doing an ad for the Halloween film on one of the TVs in a bar. That's just a tiny little self-reference. And apart from that, this film is completely disconnected. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. I wasn't disappointed at all. I mean, Halloween is a classic, but I like to see new things, especially new things that might actually be good. So I'm good with where we ended up.
I am too, up to a point. One thing I want to bring up is a lot of times in horror, you will see them take such a left turn. And we've seen this too with some movies we've covered and some sequels that we've heard about that we've yet to cover, where they just go in a completely different direction. But this doesn't really even stay in the ballpark of its original format, which I find pretty amusing. But I can also see why a lot of people might have been pissed when this came out, considering this is the third Halloween movie, and if your decision is to turn the series into an anthology series, kind of a la the Conjuring series, where you can have Halloween Season of the Witch and then you can have a Season of the Witch 2, a lot like an Annabelle Comes Home, but then you can have the Conjuring 2 and kind of have like a main plot and then a bunch of sides. It's a very profitable idea. However, I can see where a lot of people would be pissed going into this, having already seen two movies with Michael Myers, and then getting to the theater and seeing absolutely zero that is connected tonally to either the story or the character.
I think the big mistake was that the first two films were about the same story, the same mythos, the same character. Halloween's 1 and 2 were both Michael Myers films. And then you come out with Halloween 3. It's called Halloween 3, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the previous two films, like you said. Now, it's clear what they were trying to do is to develop this into some kind of Halloween the holiday centric special, where every one of these it's going to be based around the holiday Halloween, but it's going to have a different genre, different characters, all that. That is a cool idea. There's lots of stuff that you can do with it, but you can't have your first two films be a connected series and then try to do that, because that's just really jarring. And I think that as small a bit as it was when they do actually reference Michael Myers in this film, that probably just rubbed it in even harder for the people who were disappointed, because it was like taking what they expected to see and kind of just dangling it in front of their face real quick and then jerking it away.
Well, you also have to consider too what we in 2023 uh, have invested in this movie before we go into it. You have to think whenever this movie actually came out in theaters and on home video release, people had to drive to wherever to get movies, movie theater, movie store, video store, whatever, and they had to pay money and use the time allocated that they were going to be there to have a good time to see a Michael Myers movie, and this is what they get. So not only are they out time, they're out precious money for that too, which is, and here in 2023 we don't really have that issue because there are streaming platforms, and you don't like this, oh well, enjoy the other million and a half things this streaming platform has to offer.
Yeah, we don't have to drive to the theaters. We don't have to drive to the video store. We don't have any precious money. So there's really no investment to lose.
That's one great thing about living in 2023 is no one has any money.
I'll tell you one thing, and this is a tangent, so I don't want to go down it too hard. But this film reminds me of when Magic the Gathering first started out. The back of Magic the Gathering cards has a logo on it called Deckmaster. And the reason for that is because they expected the game to switch genres and canons constantly. Like there would be Magic the Gathering, and then there would be like maybe an Arabian themed set, which they did, and then like a sci-fi thing, and it would all be different games. And that just completely didn't work at all. And so now the game is stuck with this ancient card back from like 30 years ago that is completely redundant. And the reason that I bring that up is because that is kind of what happened to this film. They had this idea for what it was going to be, which is an anthology. We're going to go and we're going to visit different genres and different stories of different characters. And then it just did not work at all. And so they said, okay, screw it. We're just going to do what we started out doing.
And it's even more redundant now that we are 14 movies deep, if you include the producer's cut of Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. We are 14 movies deep into the series, and there is one movie in there that is just the black sheep of what it is.
It'd be like if Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was some film noir about like a drug lord.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, you do have Friday the 13th might be a little bit similar in that the first one, spoiler alert, the killer is actually Jason's mother. And then in the fifth one, it's actually a paramedic pretending to be Jason. But beyond that, like no other horror movie really had the balls do that. I mean, they were still slashers though, and they still resided around the basic premise of campers getting slaughtered. So you still got the basis of what you came in for. But I remember no one really cared for those movies either.
So first of all, you passed the Drew Barrymore test. Awesome. You would have survived the beginning of Scream.
I've seen that movie 20 goddamn times.
I know. And I'll still watch it again. I love that movie. Secondly, I think R.L. Stine did something similar to this film as well. Wasn't there some TV special that he did? It wasn't Fear Street. It was something Halloween based. There was like some dog monster. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
I think one of the actresses' name was Emily.
I have a black and white shirt that has Drew Barrymore screaming on it, and it's just a Scream shirt. Very popular. We had a little Halloween get together, and the dress was spooky casual, is what I said. I had a Friday the 13th shirt on because it was Friday the 13th, and my partner, he said, okay, I'm going to go change. I'm going to go put on the Scream shirt. And he comes out and he's wearing a black and white shirt, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not paying attention to it. And then, like 2 hours into the party, he says, "Baby," I'm like, "What?" It's like, "Look at what I'm wearing," and he was wearing my black and white Dolly Parton shirt. And he went through 2 hours of the party, and the only way he noticed was because someone at the party asked him, "Why are you wearing a Dolly Parton shirt?"
Okay, so I found it. It was R.L. Stine's Haunting Hour. Now, this film came out in like 2007. And the idea was that there would be a whole bunch of like different haunting hours with different stories, but that was the only one they ever made. Now, it turns out they did make a series called The Haunting Hour later on in 2010.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, I have not seen that. So I know nothing about that, but the original film was in 2007. And when I would watch that as a kid, I would think, "Oh, this is really cool. I wonder when the next one is going to be." And there was just never a next one. And so that's yet another thing that this Halloween 3 reminded me of.
For anyone who hasn't seen this movie, let's go through a bit of the plot, just so a little synopsis, just so everybody can be on board. Since we've talked about what this movie isn't, let's talk about what it is. So, a general plot of this movie is going to be kids all over America want silver shamrock masks for Halloween for a great big giveaway that's going to happen after a horror-thon on Halloween. Dr. Daniel Chalice seeks to uncover the plot by Silver Shamrock owner Is it? No, it's Connell. Connell Cochran.
Colonel.
No, it's Connell. It's not Colonel. It's Connell.
I swear they called him Colonel this entire film, Dylan.
No, because I had closed captions on. It is Connell Cochran, and in my head before this recording, I was like, "Do not say Colonel," because that's how you read the word Colonel in your head when you're reading books and stuff, and they call someone a Colonel.
All right,
It's
I
kind
accept
of
this compromise. I was wrong and you fucked up.
yeah.
So we're even. So it's Connell, but I swear I was hearing Colonel the whole time. I'll be honest with you. That whole film, I thought it was Colonel Cochran.
But he's Irish. It would have been so funny if he was still Irish but came out with a southern accent. I declare.
So he doesn't have a southern accent, but he was suppressing his accent, if I'm not mistaken. Because there's that one beautiful I don't mean to get the synopsis off track, but there's that one beautiful scene toward the end when he's explaining his evil plan, and he goes like full Irish, and it's really creepy because it's like a mask is dropping. I don't know if maybe I imagined that, but did you pick up on that?
Okay, my brain has been rotted because it's Halloween. I've been watching spooky stuff, and naturally, I've just been watching all the DCOM Halloween movies. So immediately, when you said got Irish, I went to Luck the Irish, and I imagined his voice getting really up there and just getting really Irish.
Ooh, we're gonna awaken the great old ones, aren't we, lad?
Very true. Very true. But that's all I have for the synopsis. So, in this movie, as you can tell, it's not so much a horror slasher. It's more of like a sci-fi thriller slash horror movie, if you want to call it that.
It's one of those classic conspiracy movies where there's some kind of alien adjacent conspiracy going on, and there's an organization behind it or the government's behind it, and you have this couple of characters who are investigating. I don't know if that is a genre, and if so, what it's called, but there's a million of those films, and this is in that category, I would say.
Watching this, it really explained to me why the generation that this movie came up around, why all of our moms are really obsessed with conspiracy theories now, because they were just raised on this type of dystopian sort of evil scheme against the world sort of movie. And so every time they read a news headline, they just go to the most dramatic, thematic, uh, evil plot to something there is.
Yeah, I will say this is an easy thing to do wrong. Like, if you make the conspiracy too obvious, or if you make the people involved too unlikable, then you can really mess this up. But if it isn't messed up, I almost always love these things. I love oh, there's some kind of organization in this small town, and they're keeping tabs on everybody, and they're doing something and nobody knows what they're up to. For some reason, it always gets me, uh, because it's got such a sense of mystery built into it, and it's got this sort of Men in Black, Roswell, you can't trust the system sort of vibe to it. I'm kind of going off the rails here, but I know what I'm trying to say and I can't find the right words. All I really want to get through is that I love this type of film.
I really like how in all of this, you really don't know what way this movie's going to turn, because even as a modern audience person watching this, if you don't know anything about Halloween 3, you're going to be so confused and disoriented by the lack of a Michael Myers plot that a lot of this will probably go right over your head or right around you if you're not careful. I would say this is a pretty not necessarily what happens, but the themes that play out here is a pretty by the numbers for what you get in this time frame. And had it not been for the fact that this is supposed to be a Halloween movie, I think this wouldn't be so, it wouldn't have as much of a platform as it does now as the Black Sheep. And to its credit, in recent years it's gotten a lot more love because people have been able to come back to it and just kind of watch it as it is for a standalone movie, which I think is important. I don't like comparing too many movies to too many other movies. I like to try to go in and just view something just as it is, unless they are themselves trying to lean on the predecessor, whatever that may be, and then just missing the mark completely. So, without further ado, I think we should kind of get into the setting. You have the town of Santamira, and then you have a hospital setting as well, in sort of an indescript town in California area. I'm just assuming because in the background of some shots I could see uh, palm trees. Which is funny because in the first Halloween movie, which famously takes place in Haddonfield, Illinois, you can see palm trees as well. So, this movie takes place in some weird um, global warming variant of the world where it's so hot in Illinois, palm trees can flourish.
So you're saying this is a global warming variant of the world, right?
Hmm.
So the world that we have, we don't have global warming.
Oh no, I'm just saying in this one, it's progressed to the point to where Illinois is now beachfront and tropical.
No, no, it's too late. You are a climate change denier officially.
Only a little bit. I believe if we just did the Futurama thing and dropped a giant ice cube in the ocean, it would solve everything. Wake up, sheeple. So those are our two settings. Now, for the most time, we spend the majority of our time in the town of Santamira, which is I like how it kind of peels back its own layers in that it is sort of a picturesque postcard town, but then you have scenes where everybody's just watching the out of towners, which is a bit of a fear of mine. You see it in a lot of horror movies, but a lot of times it's done in like the urban meets rural type horror where it's just hillbillies looking at city people and the fear just comes from the hillbillies are probably going to rape the city people. But here it is just like people doing their everyday job and they see a strange car and they don't trust them, and then you have the cameras, and then you also have this weird message voiced by Jamie Lee Curtis talking about the curfew is now in effect at 6 o'clock. uh, Very strange things. What did you think about our setting of this town?
So I'm getting really tired of remembering things halfway. This setting and several elements of the plot are very clearly inspired by The Shadow over Innsmouth, the H.P. Lovecraft story. In Shadow over Innsmouth, you have this kind of backwater town. Nobody really goes to it, and the whole town's economy is based around the hatchery. And this guy from out of town, who is our main character, is investigating, and he's talking to some of the local people who are all being kind of weird about it. And he eventually stumbles upon this old drunk guy, and I can't remember the old drunk guy's name. It's not Nam. I think that's the guy from Blasted Heath, The Color Out of Space. Yeah. So, but anyway, there's this old drunk guy that he talks to, and the drunk guy basically just spills the beans, and because he spills the beans, bad things happen, and that's pretty much exactly what we get here. We have our main doctor character and the daughter of the deceased gentleman from the beginning investigating this conspiracy in Santa Mira. Uh, the doctor stumbles upon this old drunk guy who's talking about all the weird stuff that's been going on and how there's not going to be another Halloween, and he's going to bring some Molotovs and burn down the factory. And of course, we know very bad things happen to that gentleman. So I would be very, very shocked if this was not a direct reference to The Shadow over Innsmouth. And to comment more directly on the setting, as I said earlier, I really, really like it because I love this sort of small town organized conspiracies with, companies, factories, government, what have you. Because they're tucked away in a remote corner of the world where you can believe that nobody really knows this is going on. At the same time, there are people living there. And so those people's lives are being affected by it. And they kind of have to adapt around this conspiracy. And I think that adds an element of believability and fear and stakes all wrapped in one. I mean, who knows what all kinds of weird things are happening in the remote corners of the country in real life.
Yeah, one other thing I noted is how there's a lot of movies that kind of take inspiration from this similar theme. This gave me uh it gave me really strong Stranger Things vibes as well, not only because it takes place in the 80s, but you have this big corporate entity that not a whole lot of people know anything about, and they kind of keep very closed ranks. But it in itself is very foreboding. The Silver Shamrock's factory that's in this town sits on a hill and kind of overlooks everything else, which I thought was kind of a nice little illusion. You have that a lot, right? Where it's almost like the factory itself is watching over these people, and you also wonder about what are the people that live here? What are their backstories? Are they just victims of this factory coming into town, or are they all just like plants? You know, people that were brought in by the factory, or as we find out later, potentially made by the factory to kind of keep up appearances of some semblance of business as usual.
And these types of stories always have this feeling that you are constantly being watched. You mentioned the factory being really high up, so it feels like it's looming over you. But there's also this sense that everyone you talk to might be a part of the conspiracy, or maybe you're being watched. Maybe there's a camera or a bug, or if you go and talk to somebody, then that person's going to go and talk to somebody else, and then that person's going to go and talk to somebody else. And before long, it gets to ears it shouldn't get to, and now you're in big trouble. It's that sort of ever present but incorporeal fear that makes things like disease so potent for the horror genre. Anytime there is a source of fear that is potentially everywhere, but you can't really see it or fight it, that works really well. And that's another reason that conspiracy stories like this, in my opinion, are really impactful.
Oh yeah, and one thing I also really loved about the factory was just the aesthetic of it. It gave me real how it's made vibes when we actually see them pouring the ceramic or latex for the masks. That was just something I noted that I really enjoyed. I like watching all those things kind of come together.
Yeah, they made it look like a real factory. Like I bought every part of that little tour scene. I really enjoyed that.
I think there was an auction not too long ago of a lot of the prop masks that were actually used, and they came with certificates of authenticity. It would have been really cool to have something like that. And to its credit, the masks in this movie, even though they are meant to be kind of cheap looking mass market things, they look cool and they are very iconic.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. The masks actually look like really high quality. You called them like kind of cheap mass market, and yeah, they're mass market, but I can believe that this company is as popular as it is because these are some really nice looking masks. And you have the little pumpkin one. You have some kind of weird like hag monster. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
what it
it's like
is.
a witch.
Yeah. There's several of them, and like it's not the sort of cheap Dollar General ghost face mask. It's this full latex, goes all the way around your head. Like it, you don't see very many well-made Halloween costumes. Let's be honest. You go into a party store, and they're charging like $50 to $100 for a Halloween costume, and it's just an absolute piece of shit. So I always get really excited when I see nice-looking Halloween uh, artifacts.
I really like how the masks in this are sort of like paradigms of the holiday. You think of a holiday, the top three things that kind of come to your head would be skeletons, pumpkins, and witches. So that in itself creates a really good iconography. And I'll go ahead and say it, this movie really did capture Halloween in a way that a lot of the Halloween movies kind of don't do well at all. Like the first movie, it was very low budget, so they couldn't really afford a lot of decorations. And the sequels kind of followed in that you're to understand it's Halloween, but you don't really get that vibe. And I feel like this is very close to the sort of atmosphere you would expect.
Yeah, it's this is definitely far more a horror film than it is a sort of whimsical, spooky film. but it still does capture the Halloween spirit very well because we have kids constantly counting down the days till Halloween. The entire plot is built around Halloween masks. And I think that's one of the bigger issues with the Halloween franchise, if you want to call it that, overall, is when you say, when we're talking about horror films and you say Halloween, I don't think about the holiday at all. I think about Michael Myers. I think about a big knife. I think about William Shatner. I don't. Maybe that's just a me thing. I don't know how everybody feels, but when I think about Halloween, the series, I don't think about the holiday at all. It's just kind of an incidental thing. And I would really prefer that the horror movies that are named after Halloween had a greater presence of the holiday spirit.
Yeah, you really got to spend that money because it needs to. This movie, or really any movie called Halloween, needs to be dripping with Halloween atmosphere. Like, I need to buy that it is Halloween night. Um, it's not enough just to throw up ye- some yellow and orange lights and put a pumpkin out on steps. Say, oh, it's Halloween. No, I need a little bit more than that. Now, I can argue maybe in the sequels it's a little different because the town of Haddonfield kind of attribute Halloween to Michael Myers because obviously he only comes back on Michael Myers, so I could understand people saying, "Hey, we're not gonna do any of that." Let's be honest, any house that has an invasion is decked out for Halloween. So I feel like the people who don't observe Halloween, they don't really have an issue. It's kind of like you never have people die in a horror movie while they're snapping.
I will say the one part of this that really grated on me was the Silver Shamrock jingle for Halloween.
Oh, and they played it.
They
They
play
played it.
it over and over again. And to be fair, I think it's supposed to get on your nerves, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. At the end of the day, it still got on my nerves. And
So catchy.
it's to the tune of London Bridges or whatever the hell that thing is called. London Bridges falling down, da da da, my fair
Okay, I was
lady.
thinking about the Fergie song,
Yeah,
London Bridges.
no, no, Dylan, not the Fergie song. And yeah, now I don't know where that tune originates, like if there's a song that was based on and back and back or not, but it's the same as London Bridges, which is not in any capacity an iconic Halloween song. So you have this company making Halloween masks, but it's called Silver Shamrock, which puts you in the mind of, St. Patrick's Day or something like that. And then the jingle is to the tune of London Bridges falling down. It just, to be in the movie so often over and over again, getting stuck in your head and not really feeling like it had anything to do with Halloween, I feel like that might have been a little bit of a miss. I think that they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. They made something that looked plastic and corporate and annoying, but it could have been a little bit more Halloweeny because it didn't actually look like it had anything to do with Halloween. It was a shamrock, and then like every now and then they flashed a pumpkin.
Yeah, I think it did exactly what it needed to for me because it was super catchy. Uh, I joked around and started singing it, and now it's just kind of stuck in my head because it's the worst earwig ever. Uh, don't do yourself the disservice of listening to it because it will get stuck in your head. And if there's one thing I'm probably going to remember long after this movie, it's the Silver Shamrock song. And I can't really speak too much for the ad because obviously I wasn't alive in 82. But from the ads I've seen, it was very uh the ads were very similar to this back then. Like they were kind of cheap by today's standards and very low res. But I think that's kind of the appeal and charm of it was it did look like something that would be marketed to children and have that really ooky spooky vibe and just have a song that like most ad songs back then would just drill into your head. Speaking of things getting drilled into your head, we should probably talk about some of our characters in this movie. uh, we can talk about our main one, Tom Adkins. That's his name, but in the movie he's called, what is it, George Chalice?
I think it's Daniel, something like that.
Daniel Chalice, yes. Tom Adkins plays Daniel Chalice, or Dan Chalice.
And then the girl's
Um,
name is Ellie.
yeah, Ellie. But I just always called him Tom Adkins because he's been in several movies, and let me tell you, the man is a fox. Like, wherever he's running, he can run to me. Love me some not Dan Adkins, Tom Adkins.
Well, I think he definitely would run to you given the opportunity. He seems to be sleeping with everybody who'll say yes.
All he does is sleep with people, drink, and smoke. And back in the day, that's all you needed to be a, a horror movie hero. Like nowadays, everyone's spoiled because we have all these Marvel movies, and you have these uh, Chris Hemsworth types that are just built like a brick shit house. But back in the day, you could have a dad bod and have the most unclean living habits ever, and still be the hero of the movie.
Which I do want to say, part of this is it being a product of its time, but I thought it was really refreshing to see a womanizer type character who isn't portrayed as an asshole, because they're almost always portrayed like assholes. It's like the writers have a vendetta against people who like sex, and this character he flirts with like all of the women. He flirts with the nurse. He flirts with Ellie. He flirts with uh his girlfriend, question mark, the person who's doing the medical examinations
The
in the
forensics
hospital,
person.
but for some reason she's like a crime scene investigator who also does private investigation work. Like that woman does a lot. Maybe I don't.
Yeah, I don't know what she does exactly, but she's doing background checks, she's doing auto mechanic forensics, but also bodily forensics. It's weird. And on top of, the only person that doesn't fall for his charms is his ex-wife, who is just over his shit. And I don't know, he's an asshole in the way like real people are assholes. Like, gun to his head, he'd probably have to struggle to remember his kids' birthdays because because his ex-wife just seems kind of over him and talks about how uninvolved he is really with the kids and what they like, and they don't even really seem to take too much of a shine to him. And again, he's always womanizing up to the point to where when him and Ellie eventually take the bed, he asks her post coitus, "How old are you?" Which I thought was so funny.
That was a joke.
I don't
Yeah,
know
no,
about it.
no, it was very clearly a joke. You could tell from his tone. You could tell from the fact that he laughed afterward.
It just felt a little too nervous for me. But Ellie herself seems, well, I mean, if. Okay, so here is the $1,000,000 question. At what point is Ellie a robot?
My assumption is that it's after she's been. Oh, oh yeah, that's a great point. Actually, I didn't think about that because he rescues her, and then they go through the whole process of sabotaging the operation, and then it's on the drive home that she attacks him.
Yeah.
That's a really great question. For some reason, that
And
just kind of
the
flew over
fact
my
that she
head.
goes and finds him at the bar and then, like, ropes him into this weird quest or whatever. It just, maybe it's just poor writing and it's just like an inorganic way for these two to get on the road. But I don't know. Something about me is just kind of like, is this. If Connell Cochran has the connections that we can assume he has, he might have just taken Ellie from the get and replaced her with a robot.
But then why would Ellie have done all of the things that she did throughout the film?
Why would she? Well, what did she really do besides sleep with Dan?
Well, she didn't stop him
From what?
from
Sleeping with her?
no, from sabotaging the operation.
Yeah, he didn't stop her from sabotaging the operation at the end, but it's either she was a robot the whole time, or she was a robot when when he saved her from the little lockup room. But either way, she
I
didn't stop him from sabotaging the thing.
I feel confident she wasn't a robot the entire time. But the question is, if she was a robot the entire time, why would Cochrane go to the trouble of showing her on the video camera and pretending to capture her and all of that? That is a level of convoluted that I really would not like to ascribe to a villain without justification. I mean, that's really going out of your way to make Dan the protagonist if you're doing that kind of shit.
It's still just a good question. Maybe she's just a rival robot from another mass company.
I guess maybe you could argue that when the signal went out, it triggered something in her. Because, okay, so also, are we thinking that Ellie was replaced with a robot or that Ellie was turned into a robot?
I would say, wouldn't it be turned into a robot? Because I feel like it would take too much. You got to think about time it would take, because even Connell Cochran talks about how labor intensive it is to make the aesthetic components look just right. So I would say it'd just be easier to make her a robot than make a robot clone.
Yeah, so if that's the case, then maybe her robot parts didn't activate until the signal went out. I don't know why they would do it that way, but the timing kind of works. I don't know. That's really confusing. It's an excellent point, but I kind of hate that you brought it up because now I feel dumb. And I don't really know what to say except that I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't think they really explain it either. Yeah, I feel like that was just there just to create a little stinger at the end, for things. Because I gotta be honest. At the end, I was kind of done with it. I felt like we already reached our conclusion, and this was kind of tacked on, and then she just kept getting up.
This is such a small part of the film, but it really stood out to me. Whenever Ellie attacks him in the car and they drive off the road, this exact scene is in so many films, and they always drive into the pole. Every single damn time,
And don't hit the fucking brake.
the car always drives into the pole and crashes. And in this film, they don't. There's a pole right there in the middle of the screen, and then they drive off road and they go right past it. And my brain was like, what? No, you have to hit the pole. I felt like I had just been denied something that I felt deep in my soul I needed. And then the car drives straight past the pole and continues to crash for several more seconds until it hits a tree. And then
Nature's pole.
when it hit the tree, there I had this moment of catharsis. I was like, yes, they hit the secondary pole.
Now, what would have been better is had they hit the real Ellie.
Honestly,
Like,
yeah, that would have been pretty cool.
yeah, and then there's two Ellies.
But then they would have done the whole thing where they fight and they both pretend to be the real Ellie and Dan has to choose between one. And I hate that trope. That's so overdone.
Oh yeah, the Ellie with one arm and then like the perfectly intact Ellie. I don't know which one's the real one. How will I know?
Ellie, where's all that orange goo coming from? Are you
I've
okay?
been drinking too many Miller Lights out of the can. I'm a little messed up here. We should probably talk a little bit about our main villain in this movie, Michael. I mean, Connell Cochran. What did we think about Connell Cochran?
Yeah, so Johnny Cochran is like the CEO or the owner, whatever, of this Silver Shamrock company that makes the Halloween masks. And we don't get to see a whole lot of him until the end. But I really enjoyed him. He has a very pleasant demeanor. He's very he's got a lot of hospitality. He speaks in a comforting way. Because of everything that's happening around him, you kind of know that he's full of shit and that he's probably evil. But this is the sort of guy that I can believe people would trust. The problem with a lot of the mastermindy scheming characters is that for some reason, writers or directors or whoever's at fault here, they think that they have to twiddle their fingers and grin evilly and all that sort of thing, and it's extremely annoying. The whole idea behind a character like this is that they're trustworthy, and I think that Cochran really pulled that off very well. He was likable. He was a bit creepy and intimidating in the sense that you could tell he had a lot of power, and that if you messed with him, it would not end well for you. And then whenever he takes on the more villainous role toward the end, where he's doing his monologuing and explaining the plot of the film, he affects a stronger Irish accent, like I mentioned earlier, and he gets kind of really really dark about things, and I think it really really worked. Now, if you want to talk about it in terms of a list of facts about Cochrane, he's an old Irish guy who made a lot of money selling toys, and now he creates animatronic versions of humans to do his bidding and is trying to harness the power of Stonehenge
That he somehow stole.
that
Like, we
he
get a clip
stole.
of it in the beginning of, oh, Stonehenge is missing. You just breeze past it if you're not paying attention because you're thinking, okay, where's Michael Myers in this? But he stole Stonehenge, and he even makes a comment, you should see how he had to get it in here. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, so I missed that National Treasures film. I would love to see that one. And yeah, so at the beginning of the film, they do show on TV, like you said, this little blurb where one of the stones from Stonehenge has been stolen. And I made a mental note of that. It was really, really obvious that that was going to be important. But what happened between then and the part where it came back was so damned irrelevant that I forgot about it by the time Stonehenge reappeared. I was like, oh yeah, somebody stole Stonehenge.
Which you never really think you're gonna say, because stealing Stonehenge is kind of a monumental thing. I swear, I tried to track in this movie where exactly our main characters, Ellie and Dan, pulled a Blazing Saddles and broke through their movie into the set of a James Bond movie. Because Connell Cochran is very much a Bond villain in this movie, and it's like this whole like the whole third act of this movie, they have just broken into a James Bond movie and are now dealing with a James Bond villain.
Yeah, even down to the convoluted ways of killing the protagonist. Like, it's not like an alligator pond or anything like that, but rather than just killing the guy once they have him captured, they tie him up to this kind of Hannibal Lecter trolley, and they put one of the masks over him, and they turn the TV on, and they just leave him there unattended like some damned fools. You're telling me all the people in this company, all of the androids, they couldn't have left one person to watch him? Very, very Bond supervillain esque.
Well, the thing is, if you leave the robot in the room for too long, it goes to sleep.
This really is becoming Jacob Half Remembers Things, the episode. What is that film where people keep trying to steal the most ridiculous stuff they can steal? Like somebody steals the pyramids and somebody wants to steal the moon. You know what I'm talking about?
Despicable Me?
Yeah, it was one of the Despicable Me's, wasn't it?
90%.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me. Well, this film reminds me of that as well because it's like, oh, somebody stole Stonehenge.
Like, how do you even go about stealing Stonehenge? I know you have robots and you have all this capability, but how do you physically go go about stealing Stonehenge, going through customs and everything? Stonehenge goes missing and nobody just bats an eye at these giant pillars of stone. And don't they kind of lose their significance? I might be incorrect in thinking this, but don't they kind of lose their significance when they're not um situated where they are?
Well, the idea was that the stone itself had some kind of inherent power, and he was putting a piece of the stone in each of the little transmitters that he put on the mask. Now, does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. But that was the idea. In my opinion, Cochrane's motivation is by far the weakest part of this film. And that's one of the ways that you can screw up the conspiracy archetype is when you finally get to the root of it and it's underwhelming. Like, I like the plan. Let's take the Stonehenge stuff out because that's just goofy. But the idea that he is putting something harmful in these masks and mass producing them, children are running around wearing them, and you have to tune in at this specific time for it to activate something in the mask. We had some conspiracies kind of similar to this just a couple of weeks ago. That kind of thing is really fun to me. I think that that's a great source of fear. But when you look behind the curtain and you see, okay, well, why is Cochran doing this? It's basically just to make a sacrifice for Halloween. And it doesn't go any further than that. It's not like he's trying to wake some old god from its slumber. It's not like he's trying to bring the earth into a different dimension, like a dark dimension. It's not like he's not even doing it for personal gain. He's just doing it to kill people as part of like a ritual sacrifice. But ritual sacrifice for what? What's the purpose here? He says that, like, oh, it's a great joke because he's playing a joke on the children. You're not playing a joke on the children. They're dead. They can't appreciate the joke. So I don't really see. Maybe I missed it, but I did not see a compelling motivation for Cochran here, and I think that is a really big weakness for the film.
Also, Cochran's untimely undoing at the end of this movie left me very confused. He like turns into a glowing piece of lead and then disappears into the Phantom Zone or something.
Yeah, so once again, I thought we were going to get something out of this. To the film's credit, I think that the way Daniel went about defeating the people in the room was really cool. So you had like this weird Skyrim stealth mission that was super unbelievable, where he's sneaking around and like hiding behind the most obvious things there. At one point, he and Ellie are moving a cart and hiding behind the cart as they're moving.
That was funny. I wanted to add the sound effect of the wheels just like squeaking, going.
It was so dumb. But yeah, eventually he's able to flip on the signal, and then he dumps a big bucket of the transmitters into the room. They're falling like rain, like confetti or whatever you want to say. And that causes all the people in the room to die. But then like all of the dead workers form this weird halo, this kind of like ritual circle of blue light.
Well, and it's the TVs because the signal's playing on the TVs.
Yeah. Like the TVs are in that shape, but so are the dead bodies because they were all around the TVs. So it almost registered as like some kind of ritual sacrifice again. We're like, okay, you killed them and now you've activated a thing. And it kind of interfaces with Stonehenge, and Cochran is in the middle of it, and he just gets zapped with a blue laser beam, and then he fades away. And I thought, oh, is something going to come out of Stonehenge? Is it going to crumble? Is something going to happen? And nothing happens. That was it. Cochran faded away. I don't know what that was supposed to be.
No, I wish I had more insight, but I don't. He just kind of turns into this weird glowing white presence and then just vanishes. Are there any other characters we kind of want to talk about?
I think we really covered all of the ones that matter. We didn't go over the, if you want to call it, the prologue of the film, where you have this guy who's fleeing from some of the automatons that are chasing him, and you don't know at the time who they are or what's going on. Very much a cold open, and he ends up going to the hospital. The reason that I bring this up, it's not so much for the character, it's just because I wanted to talk about the way the film starts. I hate when films do the whole 1 hour later thing or whatever it is, because you open up on this guy fleeing from the automaton pursuers, and we have no idea what's going on. We're watching the scene and we have no fucking idea what's going on. And then we cut to 1 hour later. And it's like, great. So I didn't know what was going on, and now an hour has passed, and a new thing is happening that I don't know anything about either. Like, why? Just cut that out. I don't need to know that an hour passed. just transition scenes.
I think it also sort of baits and switches the audience too, because the cold open is in some regard very tonally similar to a Michael Myers joint, where you have this very slow moving stalker chasing someone. And I could see being in the movie theater when this came out, thinking, "Oh, is this Michael Myers?" And then being like, "No, that's not Michael Myers." But how are they connected? Because they kind of have a very similar mo.
Yeah, they really do. And I don't know if you would like to call the automatons characters, but I do think they deserve discussing because after the second kill, I genuinely found these guys to be scary. So the first kill, which is on Ellie's father in the hospital, is a bit too goofy. They put on these leather gloves, kind of gives you the Giallo vibes. And then he starts to it looks like he's trying to suffocate him. He's holding his mouth shut, which I guess is to silence him, and then he's squeezing his nose really hard. And I was sitting there thinking, are you just trying to suffocate the guy? This is like a really unnecessarily difficult way of killing him. And then he like breaks his nose off, or that's what it looks like. And apparently he crushed the guy's skull, which is a terrifying concept. But it just resonated as a bit too goofy for me. But when we see it a second time, I don't even remember who it was. It was the old drunk guy who gets dragged like into the back of a car or something like that, or into a garage or whatever it is. And they just come up and rip his head off. At that point, I thought, wow, these guys are actually kind of menacing. You don't know what they are, you don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but you know that they can just grab you and pull you apart like a doll.
I'll agree. And one neat thing about it too is we had a cameo from a gentleman named Dick Warlock. Not even gonna lie, that's his actual name, Dick Warlock. Who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. So it was interesting to see him in that. And you do get some repeat characters in that, a la American Horror Story. The the ex-wife of Dan in this was the character Annie in the first Halloween movie. And then you have the voice of Jamie Lee Curtis several times in this. As we said, she's the voice of the announcer on the intercom saying that curfew is going into effect, but she's also the voice of the operator saying your call couldn't be completed as dialed. Please check your call and please check the number and try your call again. That was also her as well. So just some interesting trivia. Other than that, our only characters that we have in this are sort of just cannon fodder. At the time they come to this hotel before they start checking stuff out, they come into a family that just kind of give me uh, Willy Wonka's fourth golden ticket finding family. I got big Mike TV vibes from this family. And then we get this one lady who's there from another mask store in Cincinnati or somewhere, and she is just networking. She's working these people, she's handing out cards, and she says something along the lines of, "If you're in the Cincinnati area, come look me up."
So first of all, that Mike TV comparison is spot on. I did not consciously uh, acknowledge that as I was watching the film, but I got those vibes 100%. Now it's the networking lady who ultimately dies to the malfunctioning chip. Is that correct?
Yes, the malfunction, or the misfire is what they call it, which, okay, what's wrong with her? There was a misfire. With a mask? What's to fire? And what's to miss the fire?
Yeah, that was really really sketchy, but I think that this was another moment where the film really took a step up for me. There was never really a point where I was disinterested. This film kind of had me the whole way, except the very beginning I think was a bit bumpy. But when we see her death, I thought, "Oh my word, what is this?" Because this kind of light beam zaps her from the transmitter, and then all of the orifices on her face are fried and like ripped open. It looks horrifying and painful. And then a tarantula or some kind of big spider comes crawling out of her mouth. At this point, we don't know anything really about what's going on except that there is some kind of conspiracy. So for it to be revealed that this is involved, I thought, "Oh, wow. What have I gotten into?"
And also, she's still alive in that scene too. Until they take her away, she's alive. It's explained in story that they killed her later on, but through that whole process, she is still alive, which is even more terrifying.
Yeah, because as horrifying as it is to have all these snakes and locusts and spiders crawling out of you, at least most of the people are dead when it happens. Because the mask just kind of like crushes their head or something weird. I don't know exactly how it works.
Yeah, I haven't been explained the science of it either. But I think we can use this to transfer into some of our, I should say, into some of our favorite parts of the story. I will, I will say one of my favorite parts was sort of toward the end when we kind of got a collage of scenes of trick or treaters all over America. That gave me very awesome vintage Halloween feels. And you get it from Arizona, New Orleans, Maine, Michigan, all over. And it was one of the scenes that just felt most Halloweeny to me, and I enjoyed seeing that. And it did create like a looming threat of okay, this is what's at stake here, and it made the movie feel a lot bigger than it was at this point because you know all these kids are to be affected because you keep seeing the silver shamrock masks being used throughout.
So, as far as really impactful scenes are concerned, I've talked about most of those already. The death of the woman due to the misfire, that was really shocking and really grotesque, but in a good way, a horrifying way. The second kill from the automatons, I think, was really powerful. And then when Cochrane goes full villain. But if I want to pick another scene that I think I really enjoyed, this is going to seem like a really little thing, but it made me happy, is toward the beginning when Dan and Ellie first start investigating. They're talking in the car as they're entering Santa Mira. And you hear Dan say something like, we'll get a hotel, we'll pretend to be a married couple. That way we'll be able to talk in some privacy. We can start to figure out what's going on. For some reason, the fact that they had this conversation really resonated with me because it feels to me, I won't claim that this is true, but it feels to me like there are so many situations where the protagonist is just magically good at investigating things when they really don't have any reason to be. I mean, this guy is a doctor, a medical doctor. He doesn't have any reason to be any good at reconnaissance or private investigation or anything like that. So the fact that he was sitting through and working out how they were going to go about doing what they were doing, it made it feel more real to me. Because, yeah, of course you're going to have to do that. You don't just wander into a small town with a huge conspiracy and then start digging through garbage. You have to just kind of figure out, okay, where am I going to stay? Where am I going to eat? What's our story? Did that make
I,
sense, or was that just kind of like an unhinged rant?
it was something that I hadn't really given much thought to, honestly. But it does make sense, especially given the time that this came out in, where a lot of hotel proprietors, if you weren't married, they would make you split rooms and do that. So them kind of coming up with the game plan on the way there, I found was very effective. Almost as effective as the scene where he calls his ex-wife and tells him that she's going to have to watch the kids for a few more days, and then just runs in the car with Ellie and grabs the 6 pack of beer that he just had with him that he grabbed out of the store on the way to call her. So, and that, to my knowledge, that is, since he doesn't change clothes, that is all he packed for the weekend.
Back to what I was saying about the investigation, I think that whole sequence is probably my favorite part of the film. And it's unusual because normally people tend to prefer things closer to the climax, but that was when the sense of mystery was the strongest. I think the sense of danger was the strongest. You didn't know really what was going on. They're still putting things together. Dan and Ellie first to get together, which by the way, they had no chemistry. There was like no moments of bonding between them. They just decided, I guess, that they needed to have a relationship. I don't. That was really silly,
Well,
but
yeah, because he goes out after curfew. which is weird. I don't know why he would be able to go to the store after curfew, but he does. And when he comes back, she is dressed in a negligee, and then they start doing stuff, which leads me to continue to believe she was already some kind of robot. Just because, oh, let's go investigate my father's murderers. I'm gonna pack this lingerie. So just on the off chance something happens on this miracle weekend, I'm prepared.
So the amount of forethought that that would require is still just very goofy, though, because that means that Cochrane would have had to make the automaton fully anatomically correct, including all of the faculties necessary to perform the activities that they perform.
It's
Now,
just the orange goo.
I know that this is some advanced space fantasy style bullshit technology here, but I don't think it would have been that realistic. I think she was a person when they slept together.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Law of thermodynamics. Her down there area would be where the exhaust port is. So there's just a fan in her business. So if he stuck it in, it would just.
I have no intention of fact checking that.
Fans will know that's a reference to movie 43, one of the best movies ever made. But I do really like that scene you mentioned. I do like the sort of pseudo espionage, and that's one of the issues I take with movies like Harry Potter and movies like that, where there is a mystery involved. But it's like they're immediately good at sleuthing, and they're not just like having to make stuff up on the spot. They're not having to cover for each other or do any of that. They're just immediately good at giving just the right information and saying just the right things. And to the story's credit, it does position them in a good spot to figure out information, especially with the cast of characters we get. I feel like without the networking lady, we wouldn't have gotten as far as they did.
And I don't want it to be understated. These are actually really, really important parts of stories. This isn't some just weird espionage fetish or anything like that. These are the scenes where the game of chess is being played between the protagonists and whatever forces, adversarial forces exist out there. So in this film, yeah, it's when they're conducting their investigation. They're figuring out their cover story. They're setting up a base of operations. They're trying to figure out how they're going to unravel the conspiracy. In something like No Country for Old Men, one of my favorite films, you have this long sequence of Llewellyn Moss trying to figure out how he can secure the money, how he can secure the hotel room. Goes and he gets some tent poles together. He shoves the suitcase into an air vent. He looks at a map of the hotel to figure out like where the rooms are connected. It's just this is where the most intellect goes into stories like this, and the consequences of decisions that are made in this part of the story affect the rest of the outcome. So for anyone out there who thinks it's weird that I would focus so much on what might seem to be an insignificant part, it's because it's not. This is actually a super important part, and I think they did it really well.
I'm kind of with you. I've already spoke my piece on a lot of my favorite scenes. Again, I can't understate how much I really like the masks in this movie, and I do like that they are used as Easter eggs in the later movies as well. You'll always see kids in the background wearing the silver shamrock masks, which is a really cool nod. And I really like seeing that. And as I gotta give it to them, I enjoy the effect of when the kid is pulling on the pumpkin mask, and you can tell he's in pain, but you can't see what's going on. And then all these bugs and snakes just start pouring out of his face. That's really jarring. And even though we see a lot, it still plays with a lot of the theater, the mind of, okay, what's going on underneath that thing as well.
And since you brought up the masks, I also want to say, for some reason, mask related horror all is another archetype that really gets me. And I don't mean somebody wearing a mask and coming after you. That's boring. You see that all the time. But things like R.L. Stein's The Mask story or whatnot, where you wear the mask and it becomes a part of your face and you transform into that monster. Or in Halloween Town, when all of the people who are wearing masks suddenly get transformed into the monsters of whatever they're wearing. In Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, what we're talking about right now, all of the kids who are wearing the mask, they die this sort of really gruesome, graphic death, and all of these horrible, creepy crawlies come out of them. For some reason, to me, the idea of wearing a mask and that mask being a source of horror itself for the person wearing it is really evocative. And to my shame, I can't really articulate why. I would have to put a lot of thought into why that is, but I think it's because it's something that subsumes your identity. It's like it takes away what makes you you instead of or before it kills you.
Yeah, it's kind of like an attack on your character. At that point, you stop being yourself and you start being this thing. So, therefore, anything you do is attributed to this thing, and therefore that is evil. So, it doesn't matter what was there before. All that matters is what is now and evil. Probably the final scene we should probably talk about is the ending scene, and I did enjoy that scene as well because it was equal parts hopeful and also depressing. So it ends with our main character Dan basically running to the same gas station we got to at the beginning, and God, I'd hate to be this gas station attendant and have his job, because I feel like he just gets all the wild people coming in with just weird stories. But he has to use his phone, and immediately Dan calls, I guess, the TV station or whatever, in fear of his kids watching the program. And you just see this man doing the most acting that he does in the whole movie, which isn't to understate his profession or what he does, because he acts pretty solid through the whole thing. But this is where he really comes to shine, when he is calling them and just basically pleading them, stop it, turn it off, just turn it off, turn it, change it, whatever. And you can feel the desperation, you can feel the madness, you can understand what the person on the other end of this must be thinking, hearing this man do this. But eventually he does give in. But we see the kids, they just change a channel to the next station where it's also playing, and so he pleads with them, turn it off on there, and they just change it to the other channel. And so basically it ends with him still pleading with them to take it off all of the channels, which is kind of frightening. And in thinking about this must just be the local station. So this really isn't going to affect the greater of America or how far this goes out into the world. This is just hopefully going to preserve his children, because he tried calling his wife earlier and she just wasn't having it.
I could not stand the ex-wife character. Like, I can imagine that Dan has been problematic as an ex-husband, but that woman needs to shut the fuck up. She doesn't know how to have a conversation. The moment that she picks up the phone, she just starts talking and she never ever fucking stops.
Unfortunately, she is a victim of being a very popular character in boomer storytelling, which is the quote unquote bitch ex-wife or the bitch wife. And I don't mean that derogatory in any major way. It's just the character archetype. It's what their jokes and a lot of cinema was based around. The wife was always the nag, and here she is, the ex-wife, so she has to be the jaded nag. So that's pretty much all we get from her.
Yeah, so what you were talking about with the ending being both hopeful and desperate, I really really appreciated how much hope there was. Like, if as you said, imagine this from the perspective of whoever he's calling. This guy sounds insane. There's no way that you cut a commercial that everyone has been anticipating from this hugely popular toy company slash mask company, whatever you want to call it, where they're doing a giveaway and there are going to be like millions and millions of kids tuned into this. There's no way that you cut that off just because some crazy guy calls you and says that it's going to kill everybody. Even if this was a local channel, that would make it a little more believable, but still, like, major infrastructure like that can't conform to the whims of nut jobs who call in. And so, but of course, we as the audience know that it's real, and so we're like, yes, please cut it off. And the fact that he actually does, you actually start to see the channels go out. I thought, wow, are they really doing this? I didn't expect this film to end on a hopeful note. And then the kids change the damn channel, and like it just want to rip their heads off. And then you see that one turn off as well. And it's like, okay, awesome. They're all going to turn off. And then they change the channel again, and that one stays on, and he's shouting, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off, and the film ends. So we don't really know for sure whether it ever got shut down or not. But at this point, it was so late that my guess is probably not.
Yeah, it's very bummer, and we also don't know how many channels there were. I could see this being made in modern day, and it's just like a live stream. One live streamer takes it down, it's on another platform. You just watch it on that. And that's what's terrifying, is how the technology and the situation changes, but ultimately the human nature kind of stays the same. If kids are promised something and glued to it, they're just going to find a way around it to the next thing. But kudos for this to be playing on literally all of the channels.
This is once again a really powerful source of fear. We've talked in the past about how fear can be derived from something being ubiquitous, from being everywhere. You can't get away from it. And that's, again, one of the reasons that diseases, plagues, and that sort of thing is a really effective source of fear. That was the reason that the conspiracies are an effective source of fear. Well, this company being so ubiquitous, this being broadcast to every single channel all across the country, you just feel like you can't get away from it. You can't fight it. There's nothing you can do. And that compounds with the fear of some trusted infrastructure actually being harmful to you. Like people who think that chemicals in the water are harmful to you, or that maybe something in the shampoo is harmful to you, or anything like that. The idea that something that you interact with on a daily basis that is an accepted part of society is actually out to get you is extremely scary. That's one of the reasons that government conspiracies are so compelling, or big tech conspiracies are so compelling. And a lot of those have a lot of elements of truth to them. But the point that I'm making here is that it's terrifying to think that something that is so infused with our daily life could be this harmful and this horrifying. And that's what you have here with these masks, because it's a very innocent thing. It's kids celebrating Halloween, tuning into a giveaway. They want a special prize, a special toy, whatever it is. They're sitting there watching TV. They're so excited. And then it turns into a nightmare. And for me, this is something that really causes me to get emotionally invested in something. There are a lot of horrible things in the world, and I fully accept their existence, and I don't get too torn up about them, usually even when they happen to me. But one thing that I cannot stand is people who masquerade as being helpful or kind and are in reality harming you. Like if something is going to be evil or destructive, I can respect it as long as it's upfront about that. I can't stand the people who gain your trust, the people who profess to be offering you something and then take it away or hurt you instead. And so like if Cochrane had just like wanted to poison everybody for some fucking reason, then obviously it would have been a much less compelling story, but it wouldn't have riled me up as much as it did. Like the idea of using this kind of childhood whimsy and innocence for such an evil purpose really, really frustrates me and really gets me worked up. And so for me, that's a bad thing because it makes me mad. But in terms of the story overall, that's a good thing because it makes me more invested. And I think that it's a really, really scary and it's a really ire-provoking concept for a story to use.
And there's nothing else a story can do better than invoke a feeling. And I think that's an issue a lot of people take with this is in horror people have this strange aversion to media that invokes a feeling. Oddly enough. Uh, I hate when people say, "Oh, that movie makes me so depressed," or "Oh, that movie makes me want to cry." Da, 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 da. It's like, well, that's kind of what media is supposed to do. It's supposed to invoke a feeling or a reaction. Otherwise, you're just watching whatever soulless corporate dribble Disney has put out for the last 5 to 10 years.
I cannot stand when someone complains about their favorite character dying. They're like, "Oh my god, I love that character so much, and I'm so mad because they died. How could they do that?" It's like this is working as it's supposed to. The fact that you feel bad about their death, that you're angry and sad, and you feel like it was before its time, that means that you were invested. That's what death feels like. The media is functioning as intended. If you didn't care, it would be bad. Any feeling that media evokes in you, even the quote unquote bad feelings, are good. It's only boredom and apathy that are the hallmarks of a terrible piece of media.
I agree totally. The only time I excuse it is when, if a character dies and that immediate in like a show or something, and that immediately signals the turn for the series into like something awful. Like you'll see it a lot between like seasons 1 and 2, whether it be people tried to negotiate pay, it didn't work out, so they killed the character off, and then the show just kind of goes down the hill because they were the whole reason anybody tuned in to begin with, and they recast them. Kind of like whenever, just a general, like that 70s show when Eric went off to Africa and they basically replaced him with someone who's supposed to be very similar to him. Hated that. The only other exception I have to that is when like they just kill the character off because they died in real life. Because I get that does hit a little bit more close to home. And it's not so much, oh, I hate they killed this character. It's, oh, I hate that this person died.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between having an emotional reaction to something that happened in the story and having an emotional reaction to the story being bad. Like if you're upset that your favorite character died because it was a stupid fucking decision and it didn't make sense, and now like the show is worse because of it, that's different from being upset at the loss of the character.
Like Ned Stark.
Which one are you saying was like Ned Stark?
Like he shouldn't have died.
Are you actually going to make that case?
I am. He shouldn't have died.
Well, we're
He was the reason we tuned in.
I am not going to discuss that with you. Firstly, I think you're trolling me, but if you're not trolling me, we're going to have some problems that don't need to be in this episode.
All right, thank you so much for listening. We are now at the point of the show where we talk about whether we think this movie is deep or whether we think it should be cut. Jacob, what are your final thoughts on this movie?
This is as gruesome and horrifying as some of the elements are, it's kind of a light fare. It's a classic Twilight Zone-esque weird sci-fi movie that you turn on in the middle of the night. It's just a fun kind of conspiracy thriller with a tie-in to Halloween. It doesn't make me think deeply about any of the concepts. I'm not terribly attached to any of the characters. It was just really fun and creative. I mean, they stole Stonehenge. Like, we're not talking high art here, but it was good. It had genuine fear. It had genuine thrills, and it got me emotionally invested. I think that the fact that it's part of the Halloween series, ostensibly, is definitely a weakness. I think that no one in their right mind would actually like say, "Oh yeah, this is a Halloween film." And I think that Cochran's motivation was really weak. I also couldn't get over the fact that his name was Cochran because I like to think of was OJ. But overall, like I would watch this again. I thought it was really good. And if I'm supposed to give the verdict right now, I'm gonna say deep in the sense that I just liked it, and I would recommend it.
Yeah, the story, obviously, if you're as a Halloween trademark movie, it's definitely a cut because it serves no function in the series of Halloween, but as a standalone movie, as just Season of the Witch, I found it to be a really good, bleak sci-fi sort of thriller horror movie. I really liked all the themes of the robots and the druidic mysticism and the Halloween holiday, and I liked how kooky our characters were that we got to see throughout this. So I would also say that this is deep, and I would probably give it 4 out of 6 drink Miller Lite cans.
Well, that comes down to a 2 out of 3, so I'd say that's not bad.
Oh, so we did fractions on this and we reduced it.
Oh yeah, I reduced my fraction.
All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode and enjoy what we do here, we'd really appreciate it if you would take your time and leave us a review, leave us a comment, give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on. We'd really appreciate it. Also, you can get in touch with us on our social media. We'd really love to hear from you and what you thought of the movies that we cover. And you can reach us on all of our social media accounts at Deep Horror Pod. And you can also email us at deepcutsofhorror@gmail.com. And don't forget to join us next time where we are going to be covering The Curse, starring Will Wheaton. So we're really excited for that, and we hope to see you there. Until next time, stay spooky.